Yeah, we don't get a lot of animal ones in the Western
Hmm.
culture. I think the human-headed ones were by far the most dominant. You get pockets, no matter in any of the accounts, you get pockets of these other ones.
Okay.
So they may have even had even more reproduction issues, like the Raphaim, for example, which would be more coming from a serpent type of look. But they, through that dilution, though, they lose that look. So Akhenaten, for example, over 1,000 years after the flood, if you Google him and show his picture, he's got that long protruding chin, high cheekbones, large, thin lips, large wraparound eyes that glow because they were called the shining ones that would light up a room. This long, elongated oval skull without sutures, and they always will depict them females or males in most of the Egyptian um, images and statues with wearing a hat. If they're not wearing a hat, they got this really
You may.
awful looking skull. But if you're this really goofy looking, bird one that and you're more of a warrior class and you can't bring in all of these harems that you want, um, you're probably less likely that humans want to interbreed with
Yeah.
you. I'm just sort of thinking. So might be one of the reasons why with that infertility issue that was even larger of a stumbling block, or humans just found them so awful to look at, they just
Hmm.
hunted them down. Yeah, so you get a very strong tradition of ancient vampires like Lamias and
Hmm.
Liliths, and of course Lilith is a offspring of Tiamat, whether a demigod or an offspring god. Um, and they're night operating witches, Upiers, Lamias, um, and out of that sort of imagery comes an amalgamation into what our modern understanding is of a vampire, largely based on Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Hmm.
Dracula means son of a dragon. And the character was Vlad the Impaler of the Sarkaniron, or the Order Draconis, as it's called. And so you have this tradition of Nephilim who drank blood uh, to enhance their life in terms of length and to add additional sort of cognizance, additional mental um, abilities. That's was their belief, and they probably just like doing it too. But
Hmm.
that's a different story. But they did it for a reason. And sometimes they mixed it with things like beer. Sometimes it was menstrual blood. But they did a lot of, especially in the lunar sort of cycle of the rituals. They would bring in the star fires. That menstrual blood is generally known in the occult. And you also have this tradition of a quickening as well, where you get this life energy, just as with the Highlander series, where there can only be one, and this life force would go into the giant after they beheaded them. It's a sort of an allegory of that sort of life force. So as you move forward, this imagery of the vampire um, into Latin and then into Romania, it's called sort of the Strigoi, which is all
Strigoi.
connected to these other words that I was talking about, like Lamia. Uh,
Hmm.
but as it starts to come together with um, Vlad the Impaler, you have this serpentine imagery, which gives you that imagery of the original Nephilim or the original Rephaim as the main kings and the queens and as natural enemies of uh, Jewish people and Christians, so the God of the Bible, right? So you got this sort of allegory that's in there. You get the teeth of a cobra of the Egyptian dynasty that's in there for how they're going to bite and suck the blood out.
Hmm.
You get this, we're going to drink blood for immortality and life. They are like the undead, so they've already died and they're trying to somehow continue their life like the disembodied spirits do. You have this uh, pale skinned version of them, just as we talked about descriptions. The Nephilim and the Rephilim had very pale skin, and Vlad the Impaler had very pale skin. He was a Scythian. He was a Tuatha De Danann, Datanu, Tuatha Danu, and that they took their genealogies back to the Egrithi tribe of the Scythians, which was a tribe that was begat by Hercules, son of Zeus. And King Charles III said he takes his genealogies back through the Hanovers down to Vlad the Impaler. So he's this pale-skinned Scythian, Tuatha De Danann, the fair folk, the fairy folk, the fair skin folk. Fair was thought, it comes from the word fair skin, because that in antiquity, all the giants had fair skin, and that was a sign of beauty, right? It just goes part with the culture as it comes downstream. And of course, red hair and blonde hair were their most preferred hairs, because that was the hair color of the nobility. So don't be surprised to learn that Vlad the Impaler had the ultimate color of the giants, which was red. Blonde was slightly inferior in their sort of ranking in the hierarchy, but gold blonde, that sort of strawberry blonde, was thought highly of as well. So they were looking for those kinds of mixes. He had hazel colored eyes. He had an aversion to sunlight, so to walk like night.
Just wears armor all day.
Yeah, so he is sort of the imagery of a Nephilim, with the understanding that dragon is the patriarchal bloodline of the giants, and fairy blood or owl blood is the matriarchal bloodline. So it all comes together in that. And you also have this understanding of this vampire that comes through this night operating witch, this Upier, which is rooted in the Indo-Aryan Rephaim Nephilim language that shows up after the flood inexplicably in Oberon as being, or Uper, and Uber as in Germany, and as in Oberon as in the King of the Fairies in Shakespeare. And it stands for overlord. So an Oberon was part of the Tuatha De Danann and Scythian titles of a king and a warrior king that's connected to Upiers and this night operating vampire that drinks blood. The imagery and the allegories just run so deep in the Dracula story that it was written by an adept polytheist, because they create these literatures to keep their history, to keep their genealogies, and to keep their religion sort of omnipresent, even though they were living in the Christian West. Well, there's a concept in with the Rosicrucians, the Gnostics, who created Theosophy in the New Age, a concept made famous, I think, by the Rosicrucians. That's called Vril, Bril. And that has something to do with the blood, right? And that this was inherited by the Nazis, who took Theosophy and put their Grail and Volkish ideology on it and created something that they called Ariosophy, Arianism, because they believed their ancestors were the Aryans of Atlantis, or Thule, which is another sort of Atlantis type of mythology. And that if you could sort of backward engineer that there was something in the blood, that you could recreate this super race of humans.
The Uberman.
The Uberman, yeah, the Superman. And Superman, of course, comes from his father in the house of El, Jor-El, and Jor-El is his father, and his name are a Messiah of the world. As I say, they control all of the entertainment with all of their imagery. And so this real ideology is something about the blood that's different.